along with him we have Vivimarie VanderPoorten, an award winner for her poetry collection, translator and lecturer at the Open University of Sri Lanka. And they will be in conversation with Savin Edirisinghe, the winner of the HSBC Sinhala Literary and Arts Festival, the edition 1 of the Future Writers Program, and he is also one of the youngest winners of the prestigious Gratiaen Prizes. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we warmly welcome them for the discussion.
Hello everyone, am I audible? Okay, good. So how has it been? It's been good? Yeah, so we have been enjoying the 3 days of festival as well. It's the last day, all good things must come to an end, but here we are. Yeah, so our panel, actually we are trying to discuss the work of language. So we as humans are obsessed with work. We work to earn money, we work on our relationships, we work, even though we don't have work. And so we have taken that and we have put it into language. So we are trying to identify what is going on. Is language working for us, or are we working for language? Yeah, so I have Vivi and Thulsith here. So the first question would be for both of you. This is kind of like an absurd question, but I think this is a good way to start. So like the hen or the egg question, I would ask, what came first? Was it literature, writing, or language?
Okay, so thank you, Savin, for that question. Well, I guess spoken language came first. I would imagine people was signing first, and then they started speaking. And of course, the oldest form of writing system that is known today is cuneiform, right? And so that was used by the Sumerians in southern Mesopotamia as far back as 3200 BC. So that was writing, and then I think after about 1,000 years that literature came in, like the Epic of Gilgamesh was considered the oldest one of literature. So I came across this praise poem of Shuli's from 2050 BC, written in cuneiform. I, the king, was a hero already in the womb. I, Shulgi, was born to be a mighty man. I am a fierce-looking lion begotten by a dragon. So it's as old as that. And I'm sure Thulsith will be able to elaborate.
Thank you, Viv. Thank you, Savin. The earliest works of literature, like the Iliad by Homer and the Ramayana by Valmiki, were both composed as poems and recited orally until written down much, much later. And writing is considered one of mankind's greatest steps in technology to be able to communicate accurately with future generations. So writing came last, but it helped transform the way language and literature evolved and flourished.
Yeah, so where would we be without writing? Finally it came around, so we are here. And that's a nice segue for the next question, as Thulsith mentioned about poetry. So maybe if you look at poetry across time, from ancient verses, shaped by memory and the oral tradition, even like sync culture now, it's Instagram poetry, which is very modern, and people are absolutely loving it. So how would you like to define, from your perspective, what has fundamentally changed in the work of poetry, and what remained as well? It was there earlier from the very stages of poetry, beginning of poetry, and it's still here. Yeah.
Okay, so what has changed is probably the sort of cultural and national aspect, right? So in oral cultures you carry history, genealogy, collective memory, for example, like Homer's Iliad, the collective memory of the Trojan War, in classical societies like ancient Greece, epics sort of preserve collective memory, right? In early modern England, poets like William Shakespeare shaped national language and imagination. So I think that role is now a little different. And also, as you said, poetry, there is no gatekeeping now. Those days there you needed patronage, you needed still you need publication, but still like Instagram poetry can reach a global audience instantly, like Instagram. Right? So in a way, poetry has become democratized. This has of course changed the aesthetics, the structure, the length of poetry, means of production, and all of that. So there's a sort of a good part of that and a bad part also, I think. I think poetry now is more immediate, confessional, shareable in an instant, in that sense. So also it has to now compete with visual cultures, with digital, with AI, media, and all of that. Also poetry has always been political, but I think contemporary poetry foregrounds things like identity, race, gender, equality. So what we write about, I think, is also changed. But what has remained the same is probably the emotional truth, the heightened language, the reliance on rhythm, sound, metaphor, and all of that. And in times of crisis, in times of war, epidemics, poetry always resurfaces. I read one of the most beautiful poems recently on that the nurse who was killed by ICE agents. So people are still turning to poetry for resistance and for all. So some things are going to stay the same.
That's true. Yeah, so Thulsi, so you mainly work with history, and at times there are only limited evidences to support certain claims and certain studies that you are doing. So and then for history we done mainly using oral methods. It begins with voice rather than text, as you said earlier. And do historians approach verbal origins and oral traditions as source of knowledge, or is it sort of a very grey area?
Well, unfortunately, historians seem to consider written history more reliable than verbal history. So, in fact, the historical period begins only with the existence of written records. So the periods before that are considered prehistorical, and often the accounts are regarded as myth or legend. Dr. Siddhant Nirnayagala discovered Brahmi script in Anuradhapura, and his discovery advanced Sri Lanka's historical period from 250 BCE, the Asokan period, to 500 BCE, which is discovery. So Dr. Nirnayagala explained that oral traditions such as the Vedas that existed at the time did convey knowledge, but not to the same extent as writing. And with regard to your question to my work highlights why Sri Lanka's ancient history needs to be reassessed in light of the new archaeological evidence available today.
Yeah, so there's this re-emergence of people actually talking about the Sri Lankan history, especially the verbal history, and trying to reconnect with the history that is not mentioned in our books. So thank you Thulsi for that, and I think we should also move towards translation, which is sort of very similar fact in the entire discussion that we had up until now. So maybe you translate poetry. So when you are translating from Sinhala to English or English to Sinhala, it's not just words that you move an entire word. So how do you find that process to be, and what are the decisions that you take, which sometimes you might have regrets, but sometimes you might think, okay, this was the best decision I took. So how's that process, especially working in two languages and two sensibilities of two different languages?
Right. Okay, first of all, I would like to say at the outset that I'm one of those people who subscribe to the idea of translanguaging, which means that languages as I see them are not like bounded, separate entities. So for multilingual and bilingual users, what we have is a linguistic repertoire, and we draw from that when we execute translators. But for the purpose of translation, we have these boundaries, and yes, so I've only translated 2 books of poetry from Sinhala to English, so I consider myself very much of an amateur still. One book, the book I last translated was Vivimarie VanderPoorten by Thulsith. In that, he uses extremely colloquial language. It's very contextual. It's very set in a very Sri Lankan context. So there were times when I really struggled with that. So for example, in one he talks about, this was just on the eve of the economic crisis, so he was writing about Nelum Kuluno Saha Nelum Pokuno Pipuno Gohorua, which means the swamp where lotus towers and lotus ponds bloom. But lotus pond there doesn't capture, Nelum Pokuna means it's a particular site, it's an architecture, it's a fort, right? And it's so connected with regimes and all of that. So I struggled with that. Another place that I regret is where he talks about Lendora. He talks Lendora Taludora, and I translated it as cave door, but how do you translate that context of Lendora from Sinhala? So I think in a way I was pretty brave in trying to translate that, but I think there were places where I was successful as well. I was very interested by, in the previous session where Deepa Basli talked about, I think she was talking about foreignization. So the 2 strategies, main strategy for translation are domestication and foreignization. So in my books, in the books I translated, I think I use more domestication than foreignization, and I think that's a lesson for me. The next time around, I will be going more towards foreignization, which means not trying to turn everything into the target language, letting the readers also do some work. So yeah, it's, translation of poetry is impossible, so many great people have said that. But at the same time, it's a challenge, and it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, so when you were speaking, a poem popped up to my head, which is written by a Sri Lankan poet called Amar Chitra. So the title of the poem, sorry for those who don't speak Sinhala, because this is a very Sinhala poem and it's difficult to translate, and that's the point I'm going to make as well. So the poem is called, the title is Dharmadvipe. The poem is Don Ta Ta Ta. Now translate that. So yeah, possible. Yeah. Great. So moving on to Thulsith, actually we lightly touched upon the Brahmin script on the first questions that I asked, but I also would like to know the evolution of the Brahmin script, because in writing systems, Brahmin script is considered as one of the first, and it transformed language into something visible and permanent, as you said. So how did it evolve? Yeah.
Let me try to summarize from the research that I've found. Some of you might find it a bit controversial. With new evidence emerging, many academics today have cast doubt about the theory of Brahmi script originating in North India from Aramaic script. If I may start with the background, it was the Phoenicians who first shared their alphabet with the Greeks and the Persians. And it's the Persian alphabet of Aramaic that is considered to be the origin of Brahmi script in North India. But there are some fundamental problems with this theory, which was formulated about a century ago, because today we have so much more new evidence. So, first, Aramaic is written right to left, like Arabic, and Brahmi is written left to right, like Tamil or Sinhala. And second, in Brahmi, the vowels and the consonants are in two separate, distinct groups, whereas in Aramaic, the vowels and the consonants are a random mix. Both the Tamil and Sinhala alphabets have retained this old, ancient Brahmi tradition of having the vowels first and the consonants separated. Let me give an example. In Sinhala, the alphabet begins just like in Tamil, and all vowels. And then come the consonants, k, j, b, d, g. So in Tamil it's exactly the same. So, but in Aramaic, like in English, it's a random mix. For example, A is a vowel, B, C, D are consonants, E is a vowel, F, G, H are consonants, and I is a vowel, and so on and so forth. So they seem to be very different to each other, and you wonder why the vowels were separated if Brahmi evolved from Aramaic. And third, in Afghanistan and northwest Pakistan, there was a script called Kharosti, which was derived from Aramaic. So many scholars today question when there's Kharosti, which is also from Aramaic, in a contiguous region, why you want me to invent another script from Aramaic, like Brahmi, which is totally different. And finally, the evidence. In North India, there's no direct evidence of Brahmi script until the 250 BCE Asokan period. For example, no pottery shards with writing on them. But in Sri Lanka and South India, they have found several pottery shards with writing on them. So, for example, in Kodumanal and Purunthal, they have found two examples. So today, there are three theories for the origin of Brahmi script. The official colonial theory, that Brahmi script originated from Aramaic in North India, and since 2014, that it originated in South India from the Indus Valley script. And third, the possibility that it originated in Sri Lanka because of the evidence found.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and the way you explained it, it seems like history, studying of history is kind of like an evolutionary project as well, because it's always changing, and we are not very sure what evidence will appear next. So, which will lead to our next question. I think we have a presentation as well for this. Yeah. So, next question is actually, could you speak about Brahmi script and how it reached Sri Lanka? That's the main point. So we talked about the evolutionary part of it, but how did it reach Sri Lanka?
The beautifully rounded Sinhala and Tamil scripts have a common origin in Brahmi, like all Indian scripts. Can I get this?
Yeah. Can you get the slideshow, please? Yes.
So as to how it came to Sri Lanka, the case for South India is much stronger than the case for North India due to the 500 BCE direct evidence found in Kodumala and Purunthal of pottery shards with writing. And some of the letters and words were different to Brahmi, and some of the words were also different to Prakrit. So they are known as Tamil Brahmi. And in 2020, in Kallari, they found some graffiti script, which they have found similarities with the Indus Valley script. So today, many scholars in South India believe that Brahmi script evolved in South India from the Indus Valley script. In fact, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, last year offered $1 million to anyone who can decipher the Indus Valley script. I think it's because they believe that Indus Valley script has a connection with Brahmi, and that's why they want to find out. So, but in 2007, there was a brilliant article written by Dr. Malini Dias and Das Mirigalla, published in the Royal Asiatic Society of Sri Lanka. And they pointed out two very important things. First, they demonstrated that the Brahmi script does not evolve from the Indus Valley script, which is a pictorial script and is still undeciphered. And second, they noted a cuneiform connection. And they pointed out a scholar named George Buhler, a German scholar. George Buhler had studied Brahmi extensively, and in 1892, he claimed categorically that Brahmi script evolved directly from the Phoenician script, and he even gave the period, the Phoenician script of 1000 to 800 BC period. So, George Buhler's research was very insightful. For example, the Sumerians the Phoenician alphabet only had consonants. The vowels were silent. So every alphabet had to add their own set of vowels. So the Greeks and the Persians added the vowels, the new vowels, in a random mix with the consonants. But in Brahmi, the vowels were added separately in a group before. So Buhler's theory explained how in Brahmi the vowels got separated. And then came an amazing discovery in 2013 in Israel. They were excavating some stores under the palaces and the temples. And they found some Phoenician flasks, which were about 6 inches tall, made of clay. And there was a residue inside the flasks. Can you guess what the residue was?
Cinnamon.
It was cinnamon oil residue. And it was dated to the 11th and 10th centuries BCE. So the researchers concluded that this confirmed trade between the Phoenicians and South Asia around 1000 BCE. So now we know that cinnamon is endemic to Sri Lanka, the Malabar coast of South India, and Myanmar. But you may also recall that the earliest Brahmi script evidence is also found in Sri Lanka and South India. So when you combine the evidence together, it appears that Brahmi script originated in Sri Lanka or South India, directly from the trade with the Phoenicians during around 1000 to 800 BC period. Now, since 90% of cinnamon oil is made in Sri Lanka even today, I have been partial to Sri Lanka in my book for this reason and other reasons. So, in my book, I talk about the Indian Ocean maritime history during this period before 500 BC, and we found some interesting research which will surprise you. So my only goal is to initiate, to encourage more research on this subject of Brahmi, and also to encourage more research on this period before 500 BCE, because we seem to have pulled the curtain on our history during Vijaya, 500 BCE Vijaya. Sorry it took so long.
No, that's very interesting actually. And from the past we will come to the present, the very present actually. And I'll ask really this question because it seems to me like we are once again traveling back to the verbal ways of communicating with each other, especially through things like podcasts becoming very popular among the youth and also among the people, adults as well. So from there we have voice messages, we have voice typing. Now everything seems to be very verbal rather than text-based. And we also have these things like emojis, which is once again a very very ancient way of communicating. So how do you think this would resonate with literature, and also in some way are we going back to verbal era of language?
Well, yeah, we do seem to be going back to this sort of oral, but not the oral as it was before. I think it's now deeply embedded in technology. So I think still poetry and literature can function as an alternative history, as for example, about the things that history books exclude can still be preserved in literature and poetry, because even if it's oral, it can be archived. So in that sense, it can last. I mean, even if you look at things like YouTube, it's an archive, right? So yes, I think more people are listening, and it's more of a visual culture than reading books, especially among young people. They prefer to listen. I don't know if it has something to do with short attention spans or what.
I have that.
When I say young people, sorry, I didn't mean that. But yeah, but it's also things like spoken word poetry and all are bringing back a new generation of people to poetry and to literature. So I think that is something positive.
Yeah, that's true. So I think we are running out of time, and we should open the floor for your questions also. But before that, I have one single question, one absurd question to bookend the session. I asked one first, and this is the final one. Just quick answers from both of you. So the title of today's panel was the work of language. But as I mentioned earlier, do you think we are the ones actually working the language, shaping it, or is it the other way around? Is language taking advantage of us and shaping us? I said it was an absurd question.
Yes, but it's an interesting question. I mean, when I send emails, I send emails to people now, they say, no, just WhatsApp it. So I think the world seems to have evolved today to a stage where you say everything you have to say in a TikTok video in like 60 seconds. So, and when you look at how Sinhala is spoken on TV, I think you find that people resort to English words quite a lot, even in Sinhalese. So I think you're quite right. Language seems to have a life of its own.
Yeah, like at the surface level, we craft, we revise, we manipulate syntax. So we have the illusion that maybe we are shaping language. But I think language has already categorized the world for us. So in that sense, Wittgenstein said the limits of our language is the limits of our world. But I wouldn't go that far. I think the language we shape, that we have with us, shapes the way we think, gives us lenses through which to view the world. So I think in that sense, it's something that we shape and are shaped by language.
Thank you both of you. So now we'll open the floor for questions. Any questions? Okay, there's this gentleman here. Can you pass the mic? Right there.
And this is a question for Vivimarie. I'm actually overjoyed to hear that you translate from Sinhala to English, because it's perhaps because of my own ignorance. I have never known this field, and because of my own interest and teaching feminist theory for years, I have always been baffled how I could convey some of the Sinhalese songs that I myself find it difficult to understand and translate the essence of that to English. So my first comment is that 90% of my friends who happen to be English speakers don't have a bloody clue of the beauty of Sinhala song. For example, Pottiye, which is a song that I've tried 100 times to translate so I can actually supplement my feminist theory class. So my question to you is there any hope of our country really learning the beauty and the sheer complexity of Sinhala, so that all of us could enjoy at least in translation. Because, I mean, I read Vivimarie by Baudelaire when I was 10. So my question is, how pathetic it is for me to learn Baudelaire's Vivimarie in French to English, and then my society not being able. I actually read the poem you mentioned, and I was stunned by the alliteration of it, because it doesn't need a translation. You could say that it's actually written in English, because the sheer eloquence of the alliteration tells what the content is. So pray tell me, how hopeful can we be in your doing the work you are doing?
Yeah, I think some of the most beautiful literature is in Sinhalese. Sadly, I don't know Tamil, so I believe that is also, I mean, Tamil is very old literature. And again, not translated to English as much as it should be. Sinhala too. So I think, yeah, most people now are bilingual, but I think there's a generation of people, including my parents, who were, I was brought up monolingual in English, but I went to a Sinhala medium school, so that's how I was able to, learn Sinhala. We didn't speak Sinhala at home, and I think one reason why I translate Sinhala to English is because I'm very sad that I cannot write original poetry in Sinhala. I myself write in English. So that is some kind of negotiation with my identity that I chose to translate Sinhala into English. But yes, I think there's hope as long as maybe there's good translations. Thank you for that.
I think there's another question there.
And a short comment if I may to Thulsith. I was fascinated by this picture of the Sinhala heads flask.
Sorry, can you speak a little louder?
Move the mic closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Thulsith. I was fascinated by the picture of the Sinhala flask.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to comment. In the book of Exodus, which was written about 1400 BC, there is a reference to how to make holy oil for the temple. And they clearly state, it's verse 22 and 23, it says, take cinnamon, and it's referred to by the Hebrew word cinnamon. The next verse says, in addition, you take cassia. And there's a distinction between cinnamon and cassia. And from what you said about 90% of the cinnamon in the world comes from Sri Lanka, this shows evidence of trade along the sea routes between Sri Lanka and Israel. The book, the evidence in Exodus corroborates exactly what you said. So I just want to bring that to the attention of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a famous proverb in the Bible that says, I sprinkled cinnamon, myrrh, and frankincense on my bed. So I think cinnamon has been a commodity that has been traded for a very long time. And they suspect that the Egyptians used it for mummification because cinnamon is a preservative. Thank you for that.
Okay, we can get one more question because we have 2 minutes left. Quickly, make it quick.
Very, very quick. Thank you so much for the discussion today. My question is for Thulsith. One of the things, as I'm researching about ancient South Asian history, is we know, for example, in mathematics, the numbers actually have gone from east to west. So when we talk about language and script, do you have a feeling, an intuition perhaps, that as we research more and more, we may too discover that script itself maybe originated in South Asia or further east and actually moved west to Phoenicia, etc.?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think mankind has found writing much earlier than script. But as far as script goes, research shows that the earliest writing emerged in Sumerians and the Egyptian civilization and the Indus Valley civilization, all in very close to each other, 3,400 to 2,200 BCE. but Sumerians are regarded as the first. But it's important to note that the Egyptian alphabet and the Indus Valley alphabet were both pictorial alphabets. So the Sumerian alphabet had been reduced to about 30 characters by around the 10th century. And the Phoenicians, who were the most prolific maritime traders in the world, they ruled the seas. So for their inventory and for their transaction, they borrowed the Sumerian alphabet. And that then it became the Phoenician alphabet. And the Phoenician alphabet is the one they shared with the Greeks around 800 BCE and with the Persians around 500 BCE. And now it looks like they shared it with South Asia around 800 BCE.
Yeah.
So the origin is, sorry.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but you should finish it.
So I think the writing did come from the Phoenicians and Sumeria, and not the other way around, like writing. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Thank you everybody, and thank you for Vivi and Thulsith for this wonderful discussion. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, you can get your books and uploads also.
Yes, and a big thank you to all three of you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have another round of applause for this very interesting session. Thank you very much to all of you. Yes, just like Savin mentioned, the book signing and a meet and greet will be happening. Please use the exit at the back of the hall in order to make your way towards the meet and greet area, which is near the Saraswati